Are you an average American? It's a question that's harder and harder to answer today because of the diversity within our country, and that's the way that it's supposed to be. We are supposed to be a country where you can come and you can do your best regardless of what your background is or who your daddy was or what your religion was or where you came from, and you could actually do the very best that you could. And because of that, that has attracted all kinds of different people around the world, but it makes it a little more difficult to know or to define what an average American is. And so I've thought about that a little bit this week and compared some notes. But here's one way that I know that we can all identify one with another, and that is how much we eat every year. Did you know that the average American eats 1 ton of food? Now look around the people around you and just see if you believe that the people around you, you don't eat 1 ton of food. You actually eat, according to the Standard of America, 1,996 pounds of food. Every one of us has eaten that this year. If we're average, so some of you are 4 pounds short, so you need to finish up this afternoon, try to get that other 4 pounds in. And according to that information, that means about 630 pounds of dairy, 185 pounds of chicken, 273 pounds of fruit, 415 pounds of vegetables, so somebody obviously is eating more, my share of vegetables, because I'm sure I didn't eat that much, 42 pounds of corn syrup, a little light there probably, and then 85 pounds of fats. And if you divide all that up, that means each and every one of us, on average, are averaging 2,700 calories a day. About how many calories are we supposed to eat a day, roughly? 2,000. So once again, we are exceeding better than other countries at that level. But there's other things about us that makes it difficult to understand what we are on average. On average, the average American family has $3,800 in the bank. That's all they have. $3,800. The average American family, half of the families in America have someone saving for retirement. The other half do not have somebody saving for retirement. And those who have saved for retirement have about $35,000 in their retirement savings. Now, some of you are at the stage that you're spending your retirement, or as my parents like to say, they're spending my inheritance. That's what they're telling me all the time. And they will call me and they will say, hey, guess what we just spent your money on? I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. What do you mean my money? You're not supposed to be spending that. The average American family owns a house that's worth, or at least at this time when it came out, $160,000, but they still owed $95,000 on it. And the average American family makes $43,000 a year. But let's cut to the chase to find out how we really stack up against our friends and neighbors, and that is the number of shoes, the number of pairs of shoes that we own as Americans. Now, this may get a little touchy here today, all right? And so sometimes we try to just preach where it doesn't really bother you, doesn't affect your lives, doesn't affect your ministry, but we're going to go to meddling today. Because what is the average number of shoes that the American woman has in her closet? Now, men, be quiet on this one, all right? We're just going to let the lady folks talk on this. How many pair of shoes do you think the average woman in America has? How many do you think? Just think about it for just a second. The average woman has 17 pair of shoes in her home. Now, I know some of you are going, we're shopping today, husband, because I am behind. I am below average. So today, as soon as Pastor finishes, we're going to go to the mall and we're going to catch back up. According to the research in America, the average woman owns 17 pair of shoes and on average spends most of her time throughout the year wearing a total of 3 pair of shoes. Does that sound about right, ladies? I don't know, but the research seems to indicate that the average American woman has 17 pair of shoes, and she normally is wearing 1 of 3 pair. Now, here's what's even scarier about that. There was some other research about affluent men and women in our country. According to what Time magazine said, affluent men, do you know how many pair of shoes that affluent men have? Ladies, this will let you know whether or not your husband is affluent right here by the answer to this question. You know what the average affluent man, you know the number of pair of shoes that he has? 12 pair of shoes. Now think about that for just a second this morning. I'll have to admit that I did some counting, and I'm not quite affluent, but I'm pretty close to affluent, because when you start figuring out that you got to have, dress shoes, then you got to have tennis shoes, and you got to have work shoes, you got to have boots, and you got to have sandals, and you got to have all these other kind of things. But do you know the average affluent woman, according to this definition, doesn't own just an average of 17 pair of shoes. She averages 27 pair of shoes. Now, men, look at your wife and say, you are affluent. You always wonder, You didn't think that we were going to be able to make it, and but you're affluent because you have 27 pairs of shoes. That's a lot of shoes, men and women, for us to have that many shoes. And I counted, I think I had about 11 pair of shoes when I counted all of my pairs of shoes, because you got the snow boots, you got to count snow boots, right? That counts as a pair of shoes. And I started thinking about that. But as I was looking at this passage today, I started thinking about the most important pair of shoes that any one of us could have. And it's not your tennis shoes, it's not your running shoes, it's not your boots, but ultimately the most important shoes that you could ever possibly own are your peace shoes. Now, I know some of you still have some peace shoes. You probably still have some. And you've got several pairs, and you still got them and you're wearing, but that's not the pair of peace shoes that I'm talking about. I'm talking about the pair of peace shoes that we find in the book of Ephesians, chapter 6, the third of the pieces of the armor of God that we're called to have and to own. And not just to have them in a closet someplace, like many of our pairs of shoes, but to actually take them out and wear them. Here's what the passage says, Ephesians chapter 6, verse 14. Stand therefore, having fastened on the belt of truth, and having put on the breastplate of righteousness. We've talked about this the last 2 weeks. And, verse 15, and as shoes for your feet, having put on the readiness given by the gospel of peace. And as shoes for your feet, having put on the readiness given by the gospel of peace. And then he goes on to say, and we'll talk about in the weeks to come, in all circumstances, take up the shield of faith with which you can extinguish all the flaming darts of the evil one, and take the helmet of salvation and the sword of the Spirit, which is the word of God, praying at all times in the Spirit, with all prayer and supplication. Our concentration today is the third of those 6 pieces of armor that we have been given, this polyopoly of things that we can pick up to defend ourselves as we live in these crazy days that we live. And as we've looked at those, we've talked about the importance of truth, we've talked about the importance of righteousness, and today we talk about the importance for what goes on our feet, and that is the shoes for our feet, having put on the readiness given by the gospel of peace. Now, we assume that Paul has seen or was looking at a Roman soldier when he's thinking about this, as he's trying to tell us about this battle that we're in, this war that we're going to face, and that this is not just we're just going to the grocery store and having a good time coming back, but we are involved in a battle, that is a war that is raging, and that if we're not careful, we're going to find ourselves caught up into that skirmish, into that hostility. And if we don't have what we need on to protect us, we're going to find ourselves in a bad situation that's going to be devastating to us. And so Paul is looking at this soldier, and he's talked about this belt that holds everything up, which is truth. He talks about this breastplate. And then he comes to look at a person's feet. He looks at this Roman soldier's feet and says, aha, yes, you've got to have something on your feet, and for your feet, you need shoes that you put on that are the readiness given by the gospel of peace. Now, you may or may not have seen Roman soldier shoes, but they were very simple. Typically, they were a piece of leather, some way that was strapped to the foot, to the ankle. But oftentimes, through the sandal, the bottom of that sandal, they would stick nails or drive nails or spikes so that they might have a cleat, if you will, in order that they might have a stability when they're finding themselves in battle. Because when they're in battle, that is not one time, that is a time that you do not want to be slipping around. And so these are shoes that have spikes on them. I love how when you really look at the Greek, the actual language, word for word, the way that the word order is structured, really says, and underbinding the feet in readiness of the well message of the peace. If you really just broke it down to the actual Greek words without smoothing it out for our language, you're seeing several things here that are very important. There is an underbinding of the feet, there's something about readiness, and there's something about this message of peace. When we come to our shoes of peace, there are really 2 shoes to that. There are really 2 shoes of this peace shoe. One of the shoes is the peace with God shoe. I want you to think about those shoes that you have. In fact, here's what I want you to do. I want you to think about that pair of shoes that is somewhere back in the closet that you never, ever wear. Can you think of that one particular pair of shoes that you have there? Maybe they're a little too tight, all right? Maybe your foot has gotten a little too small for them. Maybe there's possibility of that. Maybe you're hoping that style will come back, that you've got some shoes that will do that. I'm going to think about a particular pair of shoes. This past year, we got to go on a fancy cruise, and so we had to have the tuxedo. In this cruise we were on, you had to have tuxedos, and so I put a tuxedo on, so I bought the shoes. And those are shoes that, they look nice, but they're not much for comfort. And so I bought those shoes, and they come in the little baggies. You ever had fancy shoes that come in the little baggies? You know what I'm talking about? They got the little cover thing. Nobody's what I'm talking about. But I got these little shoes, and so I put them in the little baggies, and so they're staying up on the top of the shelf. That's the shoes that I'm going to think about. What particular pair of shoes are you thinking about? I want you to think about one. Okay, tell the people around you which pair of shoes you're thinking about, because it's important. All right, spend a little time. Go. Tell the people. Think about the shoes. Out loud to the people around you. I want you to think about a particular pair of shoes that you may or may not wear. Not the ones you're going to pick out this afternoon. No, that's not the ones I'm not talking about. But think about a pair of shoes that you got. Got it? I want you to think about those shoes, and when you think about those shoes, I want you to know that there are two of those shoes, probably. And one of those shoes, I want you to represent the peace with God, and the other shoe we're going to talk about in just a moment. But one of the shoes, that pair of shoes that you're looking at, is the peace with God shoe. Now, what does that mean? Well, all of us have to recognize that when we go into this battle, the message that we bring to people is that they have the opportunity to have peace with God. Now, I don't know that you and I recognize this because we have come to know Christ and we have peace with God, our Creator. But if you are a person who does not have peace with God, you do not know your Creator, you do not have a relationship with Him, can you imagine that if that were the case, that would affect all of the relationships that you ever encounter or that you ever touch? You would think that if you don't have that connection back to the God who created you, the God who desires to have a relationship with you, if you don't have that relationship right, there's going to be a tendency for every other relationship in the world for that person to be messed up, to be askew, to be something that's just a little bit off. And so what you and I have to recognize is that we have a major obligation to help people make right that key relationship that drives every other relationship. And you and I have a calling, because we have peace with God, to take that peace to other people. Don't you find it interesting at all that we're talking about soldiers' armor, and armor and soldiers go toward fighting, and yet the thing that Paul talks about to us about these shoes is that these are shoes of peace. These are soldiers who have a message of peace. Not soldiers who have a message of war, but soldiers that have a message of peace, and that peace is between man and God because of what Christ has done. We talk about this passage. For all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. This was a key passage last week for us. But we also went on to talk about that in verse 24, it says that also those who are at war with God, those who are not at peace, those who have fallen short, are justified by His grace as a gift through the redemption that is in Christ Jesus, whom God put forward as a propitiation by His blood to be received by faith. What does that mean? That means that there is an anger, there is a hostility, there is a war between God and man. And something has to be done to appease God's anger, God's wrath. It's interesting to me that you study all kinds of different histories of people groups. And you will study different groups, and a lot of them at the core have this idea that they have got to do something to appease the gods. They've got to make some kind of what? Sacrifice. Why is that? Well, there's something driven deep within man to know that there is a war, there is a battle between God and man. So how does that wrath be appeased? Well, it's not by the sacrifice of some human being. It's not the sacrifice of some product or goods or service. It is the appeasement of God that God brings Himself by Jesus Christ, by His blood, to be received by faith. And here's what I love about us. We as a congregation recognize that people are in separation from God because of their sin, and they need peace brought between themselves and God. That is our chief message as a people. That we are to come to say that, you know what? God has paid the price for you. There is no sense to have to be in continual battle with God. Some of you remember the stories that after World War II that they would find occasionally a Japanese soldier who had holed up in some small little island, and he continued to think that the battle was raging, that was still fighting, because he never got the word, the paperwork had been signed, and that there was now peace. You heard about stories like that, right? Well, you and I go into a world where people think that they have to be at war with God, and that God continues to have to be at war with them, when in fact he has sent his own son to bring that peace to them. And that's what I love about us. We are a people who know that. We are a people who know that we have good news to bring to people. That good news is they don't have to be at war with God. In fact, as a congregation, we do some significant things about that. And I just want to share just a minute this morning, because there are a lot of things that we do to help bring peace that you don't even know about. One of those things is that 13% of our budget, 13% of the undesignated receipts that you give us go toward what we call mission efforts. Those are to, whether they're cooperative program giving, whether they are giving directly to international work, or whether that's directly to North American work, or whether that's directly to local work that goes on here. 13% of our budget from the very beginning, the very top, goes to tell people that the ultimate war between God and man is over. All that they have to do is to agree to the terms that God has given, and those terms are that he sent his only son to die for us, to take our place, so that the wrath that he must pour out upon sin is poured out upon Jesus Christ, and his righteousness, his goodness, is imputed to anyone who receives that, anyone who repents and believes, and they too can have a relationship with God. It doesn't matter how much money you have, it doesn't matter what you look like, it doesn't matter what recognition that you have from the world. All you have to do that, and we spend a significant portion of our resources trying to let people know of that before you and I even get involved. In addition to that, this congregation does an amazing job in our projects called the Mission and Me Giving Projects. And you have done such an amazing job with this over the years that we are really a church that people see as telling good news that the war is over, that people can have peace with God. And in fact, this weekend it was happening. I don't know if you ever drive here on the weekends and worry about, should I be here or not? Because there's all these people in the parking lot. I don't know if maybe that's just me since I'm the pastor. I'm kind of concerned because I will drive by. And this weekend is another one of those weekends. We had an amazing FBC cooking school that was happening here. The building smelled great when I got here yesterday afternoon coming in. Just smelled wonderful. Had over 80 people or so enjoying that time. Then on top of that, we're hosting, this was our last Saturday for Recplex basketball, and so we hosted basketball all day long. But in addition to that, I bet you didn't know that this weekend we had 15 people as a part of the Church Planting Institute. You may not even know that we have a Church Planting Institute. It's named for Tom Fish, who was a chairman of deacons here for several years and led our mission efforts and did a wonderful job in doing that before his passing about 2.5 years ago. And we have been starting this Church Planting Institute to help train young people, not necessarily young people, but people who are interested in planting churches. And this weekend we had 15 of them here in our church, meeting with our staff, meeting with Adam Stoddard, who is our Church Planting Institute director, who are talking about different ways and going into places where people don't have churches or no one is trying to reach a particular people group, and that was happening this weekend. I bet you didn't even know that was happening, whether you were doing anything about it or not. Isn't that amazing? Do we have a church like that? Because you give the Mission to Me, because you give through your budget, those things are amazing that are happening, because we want to go tell people who may be separated culturally from the American church, the Western Judeo-Christian concept. We want to go tell them that they don't have to be at war with God. There is peace with God. In addition to that, this week we're going to be signing some paperwork where we're going to be helping and actually beginning a partnership with Oaxaca City, Mexico. I mentioned this just briefly, and I don't want to take lots of time up here today, but we are a church that wants to adopt an unreached, unengaged people group, and I've talked to you about this in the past, and so we're giving a portion of our about 1.5% of our budget is going to go toward this effort, and so we went a couple of weeks ago and looked at Oaxaca City, and we looked at the region of Oaxaca, where there are about 39 unreached, unengaged people groups. And we went to a village, and we began to explore this village, 1,500 people. There are 2 known believers in that particular village. And we began talking about a partnership, and we thought that's what God was going to do. But then we took another little trip to a seminary, the Lacey Baptist Theological Seminary in Oaxaca City, started in the late 1800s by a man named G.H. Lacey. who was from Arkansas, who went to Mexico, and he began to share the gospel, and he began to train Mexicans about how to share the gospel with other people. And so there's a seminary that's there now, and we're going to be entering a partnership. We're going to help that seminary over the next 3 years, hopefully, with our project. Hopefully, we're going to ask some of you to go and do some physical things as well. But we're also going to be able to sponsor 3 Mexican national students to go through the equivalent of the Oaxaca Baptist Theological Seminary Church Planting Institute. And so we're going to be able to sponsor 3 Mexican nationals who will come and live on their campus in Oaxaca City for a year, receive theological training, understanding how to be sharing the gospel, and then they're going to be going to a village for the second year of that 2-year partnership in order to try to love people to Christ and live that journey with them, in particular in one of those villages that is focused on an unreached, unengaged people group where there are no believers or very few believers or no one trying to reach them. And you and I, because of the things that you do, just that you do normally without you even knowing that you do them, the amazing work of God goes out among this place. And I'm going to be sharing more in details in the future. But I want you to know that we are a people who are concerned as a unit, as a group, as a congregation, of telling people that they can have peace with God. One of the challenges, though, I wonder about, though, is how well do we do that individually in our own lives? It's one thing to contribute to something and to be a part of something larger than ourselves, but how much of our efforts, how much are we thinking on the top of our minds about sharing with that people can have peace with God? Well, as I thought about that this week, I realized that probably one of the reasons that we don't talk much about people with peace of God, with peace, excuse me, I can swallow here, that we don't talk much about peace with God, that we don't talk to people much about having peace with God. Well, oftentimes it's because we don't have the other shoe of the peace of God shoes, and that's the peace of God. We live in a strange time as people. And we have an obligation to go and share with everyone, but with someone in particular, but everyone, that they can have peace with God. But we don't often do that as long as we are worried or anxious or concerned about whether or not we have that own peace. See, here's what's funny. We're getting scareder and scareder, if that's a word, as believers to go and share the gospel because we're afraid of what's going to happen. We're afraid of the response that somebody's going to give us. And what I'm finding, many of us now, we are so afraid of what's happening in our culture that we're afraid to even engage our culture. We're worried about everything. And the one group of people that should not be worried, the people that should have the peace of God, should be us. But if we don't have the peace of God living within us, if we're not preparing our hearts with the peace of God, then it's hard for us to even go tell other people that they could have peace with God. So what I want to do here in the last couple of minutes is just remind you of a verse that you're familiar with. It's not in our context, not in our passage, but you are probably familiar with Philippians chapter 4, verse 7, aren't you? I mean, this is a verse that we talk about all the time. It makes a great verse for the refrigerator. It makes a great verse on your car. And here's what it says. And the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. Doesn't say, oh, doesn't that feel good? Just say that with me. Oh, doesn't that feel good? I mean, look at that. The peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. We love that verse. We think that's a great verse. But do you know that verse is not just something that magically happens out of the air? That verse actually has some things that have to be done before that to happen in your life. Let's look at this. Here, verse 4. If you want the peace of God to surpass all understanding in your life, you have to rejoice in the Lord always. And this is not fair, is it? God's going to ask us to do something before we get his peace. We want his peace. We don't do anything about it. We just want to wake up with peace. And here's what he says we have to do. We have to rejoice in the Lord when? Always. And then just in case we didn't catch it, they do what? Repeats it. And again, I will say, rejoice. So if you want to have the peace of God, the only way that you can have the peace of God is not just sitting around saying, oh, God, give me the peace of God. What you have to have is you have to have a rejoicing spirit where you begin to rejoice. In all circumstances, in all ways. And to have that just continual in your life. You can't have peace without you rejoicing. then the second part of this says, let your reasonableness be known to everyone. That's a strange word, isn't it? It's a word that's very difficult to translate in the Greek in one word because it has so many different nuances of the meaning. Sometimes you'll see this, let your gentleness be known to everyone, or let your gentle spirit. Really the concept here is that you are gracious. Let your graciousness be known to everyone. Let's continue, and then I'll put all this together, and then I'll let you go home. The Lord is at hand. Do not be anxious about everything, but in everything, by prayer and supplication, with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God, and the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. Let me go back and pick this up. There are four things that if you want the peace of God so that you can go tell people they have peace with God, there are four things you have to be doing. You have to do these things. You can't sit around and wait for someone else to do them. You can't wait for God to do them. You have to do them. One, you have to rejoice in the Lord. You have to be reasonable or gracious with those around you. Then you have to choose not to be anxious. And then with everything that you do by prayer and supplication, with thanksgiving, let your request be made known to God. And then the peace of God will surpass all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. If you sit around and watch Fox News or CNN all day long, okay, and you talk to everybody else about how bad it's going to be or how bad it's going to get, all right, and you go around complaining without rejoicing, and you go around not only just talking about how bad it's going to be, but then you begin to start hoard up spam in the back of your closet because, you know, the world's going to end. And if all you got spam stored up, I mean, the world has already ended, right? I mean, it's not going to be good. And we're not going to have any peace. They're telling you gas prices are going to go to $6. That's what they're saying, right? Okay. So what? Gas goes $6. If we're rejoicing in the Lord and we're telling God what we need, the peace of God's going to come to us and surpass all understanding. Whether gasoline is $6. How many of you I mean, I know I'm meddling, but I get so frustrated that we as Christians run around so scared, panicked that the world's going to end. And then we do dumb things to prepare for the ending. How many of you, if you would have been told when you were a kid, some of y'all are older than others, but that gasoline was going to be $3, how many of you would have thought the world would have completely come to an end because you were paying what for gasoline? 15 cents, 4 cents. The dinosaur himself was there, and you're just getting gasoline from him. I mean, you would have panicked. You would have said, how could we have ever survived? Now, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't prepare for things. But listen, believers, we shouldn't be anxious and worried. And part of it is because we're getting anxious and worried is why we're anxious and worried. So, I'm sorry, I'll stop here in a second. But I was flipping through, and I was watching this show called Preppers. And these are people who are preparing for the end of the world. And so I was watching this. This is how smart we are sometimes. I was watching, and this family, this husband and wife, they've got their house stuffed full of food. Okay? And each one of them's got 2 pistols with 6 shots apiece. And they've gone on national television to tell everybody that if the world comes to an end and nobody has any food, we've got food. And we have 12 rounds to stop you. That's not real smart. Because number 13 is going to get in, right? And they've lost it. Oh, I'm not saying that we shouldn't prepare for things. I'm not saying you shouldn't have a little extra food over here. I'm not saying we shouldn't prepare, because we're supposed to have these shoes are of what? Preparation for the gospel of peace. But here's what we can't do, believers, regardless of what gasoline costs. Okay, I don't know how much gasoline is going to cost. It's going to go up, probably. Don't you think? But what we have to do is not only tell people they have peace with God, and that's the most important thing, right? I mean, the worst thing, believers, the worst thing that can happen to us is we die. That's the worst. That's the worst thing that can happen. We die, and we go be with Jesus for how long? That's the worst thing that can happen to us. So why do we running around, worried whether we're going to have enough to survive? We ought to be warning everybody else, hey, look, it's going to be bad. You're going to die. And if you don't have peace with God when you die, that's going to be really bad. But when I die, it's going to be really good. So why not start living with this peace of God in us, because we have peace with God, and that we might live with confidence and with boldness in these days, because we know that there's a better time coming. There's a better place coming. And this peace of God, we can have that if we rejoice in what we have, because you know what? Even if it's $6 of gasoline, we can still get to gasoline. And even though whoever gets elected, I don't even know. In fact, I don't even care anymore. I'm just about at the point I don't care who gets elected. Just elect somebody and let's keep going. Let's try to solve whatever it is we got going on. But we have these things, and much of the way we feel is contingent upon the way that we allow ourselves to feel. Let me just close with this again, and I always run out of time. One day I'm not going to run out of time, but here I have today. Here it is. If we rejoice in the Lord always, and be gracious and reasonable, and not allow ourselves to be anxious about anything, but in everything, by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let our requests be made known to God, and the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding that no one will get, will guard our hearts and our minds in Christ Jesus. That pair of shoes that you got in the corner in the back closet that you don't wear, okay, they may look like that. If they look like that, that's probably where they should be, back in the corner someplace. Shouldn't wear those out in public. But this week, that one pair of shoes, I'm not talking about physically the literal pair of shoes, but that one pair of shoes, these shoes of peace that we don't always put on, can we put those on? Christ died for them so that we might have peace with him and his peace in us as we live these days. Would you bow your heads, close your eyes?